This is the new Audi RS6 GT. It's a bonkers £180,000 send-off to one of the best cars of its type ever. Now, I've just returned from a 2,000-mile road trip in my Ferrari Purosangue to the French Alps, where I challenged you to name me a better car for it. I'll wait. If I got £1 for every reply that said RS6, it would probably be enough to buy one of these. Unfortunately, that's not how it works, but thankfully Audi UK have jumped in with the opportunity to drive theirs, being number 659 of the 660 cars being made. Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel. So, is this that better car? Here's the thing, the trip I went on with this was a trip where, for parts, we had 4 people in the car, we had luggage, including skis, we also wanted 4-wheel drive, in case the weather turned nasty and we might find ourselves a little bit stuck. But not only that, I had plenty of opportunity to go and enjoy some nice mountain passes. Yes, the majority of the journey is on the motorway, it's long, it's sitting on cruise control, but at the other end, that small amount where you're driving up to the ski resorts, getting to put your foot on the throttle, is an incredibly exciting part of it, and that's where this being a Ferrari with a V12 has always kind of stood out. Now, I had owned an FF and then 2 Lussos and then the Purosangue, the follow-on to that. But it was taking this car on this particular journey to join my family. Unfortunately, my dad actually managed to break his foot, so for a while it was being used as a chauffeur car to transport him around. And that's what I was thinking in terms of other rivals, right? There are the obvious, the Lamborghini Urus and the Aston Martin DBX, but it was the RS6 that you guys named amongst the Staratos and the Dakars and the other perhaps not so practical cars for the occasion. But this is the flagship RS6, the last of a generation, the last non-hybrid version of it. So let's take a walk around to understand more about the GT. Before we go and drive, we need to understand what on earth this car is about, right? It is the ultimate version of the C8 generation. The RS6 has always been this insanely cool family wagon meets sporty, under the radar, kind of sleeper style machine. The GT is the final send-off of it, and you might have noticed that this is the very same car that my friend Raz from Remove Before Race drove in Spain, that Joe Achilles drove on a trip over to the Isle of Man, that Seen Through Glass, Sam took on a journey over to the Netherlands as well. So it's been around a little bit. It is quite cool that it is the penultimate production run of the 660 cars. But basically what Audi have done is taken the already pretty quick machine. I mean, there's a 4-litre twin-turbo V8 in the front, making 630 horsepower now in this, and combined it in a car that has an incredibly in-your-face heritage livery linking back to the Audi 90 Quattro IMSA GTO, which when it entered the race series halfway through, basically won everything from that point onwards. Given it bespoke bodywork, the bumpers, the insert, the spoiler, it's got manually adjustable coilovers. In a family wagon. The interior has the carbon Audi RS bucket seats, cloaked in Dinamica and Alcantara. We've got a few bespoke features and things that I can show you through as well. But ultimately, this somehow takes the subtle family machine and puts it a little bit in your face with the livery, one of 3 different options, and the very bright white wheels. Let me show you a little bit more closely around the design and some of the special details of the GT. This car raises a lot of questions. There's a lot about it that is bold and arguably makes no sense. For example, this is an RS6 with a carbon bonnet. They have left the visible carbon stripes as part of the livery, and it also wears carbon fiber front wings with the bespoke shapes, the GT badging worn around towards the side. But of course, up front, it begins with the wide single frame grille, as Audi call it. We've got the blacked out Audi rings and all of the badging. You have all of the sensors and technology discreetly hidden away, and spot the logos with the heritage style rhombus replacing the traditional colorway that you would normally have. Now that's all part of this bespoke fascia worn by the GT. Come around, and another big element are the wheels. You are not missing those. Hiding behind them as well, the carbon ceramics, which are standard on this, and as I mentioned, the manually adjustable coilovers that have 13 clicks on each of 3 different damper variables. Effectively speaking though, it's 30% stiffer at the front, 80% stiffer at the rear than a standard RS6, but of course many different things you can configure between those depending how you're driving it, because you can take this to the racetrack. Gone are the standard roof rails. You're not going to be putting roof racks and roof boxes on there in the standard way, and it has this enormous spoiler over the top at the back, very rally-esque, very reminiscent of some of the older Quattros. Come down, new bumper as well back here. We've got the reflector in the very center. You've got this add-on here, which just somehow rounds off the rear look. Of course, the new badges again, RS6 GT, worn back there as well. And I've got to say, with those arches, this thing looks wide, it looks serious, it looks mean, it looks fit for purpose. But we're talking about an RS6 that carries a list price of £177,115. Now there are 3 different colorways, effectively this, the Heritage Link, but also one in black, one in grey. So limited options in that sense, but with all of these crazy upgrades over the standard car. Now the 4-litre twin-turbo V8, no hybrid assistance, no electric in this, makes 630 horsepower, that's 621 brake horsepower, and 850 newton meters of torque. So you'll get 0 to 62 miles an hour in just 3.3 seconds, thanks to the Quattro all-wheel drive, and it will go to a top speed of 190 miles per hour. This is a serious powerhouse. It should come as no surprise that I'm a big fan of anything when it's got a limited number behind it. Just knowing about the different cars, that's where our platform exclusive car registry comes in. ECR actually has the Audi RS6 GTs. Already a few hundred of them. The cars have just started production. They're being built and delivered now, but it'd be great to see even more coming through to understand the different specification breakdowns. I can tell you that somewhere around 60% of them actually wear this main flagship livery design, but super interesting to see. So do get involved in ECR if you're interested in this car or plenty of other limited edition special supercars that are out there. We'd love to have you on board on ECR. I haven't yet shown you inside. This is where we have the RS carbon bucket seats. In fact, it's when you see these from behind that they look even more impressive. The full satin dry carbon fiber seat backs on both sides with all of the detailing. For example, on the seats, which have Dinamica material, you've got the hexagonal red stitching matching with the logos and the inserts up top. And then you have this bronze copper stitching that runs around the outside to add a contrast, matching with the livery really on the exterior of the car, but effectively this one style finish. We've then got Alcantara with the steering wheel. We've got the digital displays, all of the controls and screens and systems that we know from the model across its lifespan. We've got a new style for the dials as well, the classic style roundels, but more of this to play with and show you through a little bit later on. We've got red seat belts, nice touches there as well. I think though, I should probably press the magic button, take a listen to the V8. Not bad as a startup sound. Now we've got a host of different modes and controls. So for example, if we go into RS2 mode, or if we go here with the drive select, more of which we can have a play around with a little bit later on, for example, into dynamic mode, we'll get it warmed up and then have more of a play. But this is calling out to be driven. So let's take it out and go see what the RS6 GT is like. Over the years, I have driven quite a few different Audi RS6s, from visiting Abt in Germany to the factory cars, and in fact, about 8 years ago, we picked up an Abt 1 of 12, celebrating 120 years of the company, which we drove on the Wes Shmee tour as our support car at the time, and then also drove on the Gumball 3000 from Dublin to Bucharest. So we had wrapped the car and we did quite a few thousand miles with it. And I chose that car as the perfect Gumball machine because it's cool, it's fast, and it's practical. And we had 4 of us in the same car, and it did such a good job of it. Oh, electric Abarth going the other way. It was so well suited to that journey. You know, spending hours every day driving a very long distance. And at the moment, I'm in the completely default normal comfort settings in the sense of what you can set through the digital side of the software. Of course, the suspension is manually adjustable. And driving along, you feel that it's firmer than a standard car. I'm not going to try and pretend otherwise. It's quite firm, especially on our bumpy English roads. But on the other hand, it also, ignoring the very in-your-face looks, is actually quite easy to drive and to live with and to just get a move. I've been reminded very quickly of some of the things that I'm not the biggest fan of, like haptic touchscreens, because I can never find the right button and I find them immensely distracting while you're driving. And that's something that I've certainly said in the past about the cars with this generation of Audi's MMI, the touch interface. The steering, not perfect, but you've got four-wheel steering. It can turn around and do a U-turn in a very small space, believe me. And overall, it's just nice and comfortable and compliant and easy to live with. And that's what I would say is my previous experience of the different RS6 models. Some of them I've been lucky to stretch on the Autobahn, properly stretch their legs and have a whole lot of fun, 300 kph, etc. But normally, your factory RS6 would have a speed limiter of 155 miles an hour, 250 Ks, or maybe you'd get to bump that up to 170-ish, about 270 Ks with, or 280 Ks with the optional kind of driver's package that you can spec. Now, you're probably seeing it kind of bumping around and shaking a little bit because this is a very rough road to bring a car like this to test on, right? This is not your comfortable, gentle, easy-going bit of tarmac. The steering is quite lively. I do quite enjoy it. It's a weird balance, a weird mix, but once we get out of the village ahead of us, I'm going to turn things up a little bit and have some more fun with it. It is a beautiful afternoon, but it is the time of day where I think just about everyone is on the road somewhere, rush hour. It is what it is. We shall enjoy kind of commuting. At the end of the day, that's what the RS6 is always basically about. Now, at the moment, I'm in all of the normal settings, as I said. On the steering wheel, I've got the RS button. So one press into RS1, a second press into RS2. Exhaust valves are opened. It's got a little bit louder. Also, then you've got the sport gearbox if you want to pull that down to have still automatic, but just choosing a slightly lower gear. And then you have Audi Drive Select. Now, the haptic control buttons down here, I always find an absolute nightmare to get right. Have I got that? Are we in dynamic? I hate having to look so far away from the road, especially on a narrow country lane like this. Now, because of doing that, it's taken it out of RS2, so we kind of want that back. If you go manual and pull one of the paddles, it will then stay manual. So otherwise it's going to be driving in automatic, and that was quite narrow as that van was exercising the width of his vehicle. Anyway, country lanes, RS6. The steering, I actually prefer it in the regular setup. It gets a little bit like my old Hurricane STO did. I mean, that makes sense because they're from the same family. A little bit not quite right for me, not quite natural. Of course, I like the sound. You've got the V8 grumble in the background. You've got that constant noise of it. And if you start downshifting a little bit more, we drop it down to, let's say, to second gear here. Start to get some pops, bangs, crackles, and cool sounds coming from it. There's a lot of torque. Obviously, you feel that quite significantly. 630 horsepower these days, scarily, isn't all that much. But 850 Newton meters is certainly something you'll still, you know, gosh, when you put your foot down, it does like to squirm and squirrel around a little bit. I mean, these are bumpy roads, and this is something that's set up much more for Germany, for the smooth countryside twists and turns that you find over across the channel. Threading it through the lanes, I'm conscious it's a big car, but it's not a stressful car to drive, you know, it's still an RS6 at the end of the day. It's still a pretty daily feeling, and if it wasn't in this livery, as I constantly reference back to, you wouldn't really notice it. You might think that it's just, you know, some parts bolted on. And that's an interesting topic of conversation because obviously brands like Abt have been doing this for a very long time and significantly less expensively than this is. This is a lot of money. This is a last hurrah special, that link and throwback to motorsport, a factory limited edition, an ECR worthy car, you could say. It's something very unusual. And that gets narrow. Oh, goodness me. I think the hedges are growing slightly more. Anyway, back on the power. The four-wheel drive picks up amazingly. The turning circle is brilliant. Steering, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it's still a 2.1 something ton family wagon, right? It's not an ultra lightweight, pointy, shooty thing. And that'll be an interesting comparison in the moment with the Purosangue. I'm not entirely sure exactly how this specific car is set up at the moment. I don't know the exact notches and settings that it's been put to. We could take maybe a little look at it. But certainly it mixes some fun to drive in a car that still has the bench seat behind us, a massive amount of space, you know, in the boot, in the trunk. If you want to lug the dogs, lug the family stuff around, the stroller, whatever it is, you can fit it all in and still go and have a bit of a riot with it. Pulled in for a moment. It is a beautiful afternoon. I'm going to state the obvious here. White car doesn't stay particularly clean, especially not when you have white wheels. Now, while we are pulled over, I do want to talk about the engine, right? The 4-litre twin turbocharged V8. We know it, we love it. It's been in so many different cars. It can be tuned to pretty immense horsepower figures. It's been in the Urus, it's been in a ton of others, but it's kind of being retired in purely combustion engine form. Of course, hybrids, battery, that is the technology of the future, that is the next generation. But this, that is a very light bonnet, is our power plant, the beating heart. 630 horsepower in here, as I've said. Yes, you can get a ton more out of it, but I don't think anybody for a second is going to say that this is a slow car. Do you need more than 630 horsepower in your daily? Not really. One thing I do quite like though, which you can immediately see, is the exposed carbon fibre on the underside. You are getting something for your money with this, even if it may be an awful lot of money along the way. Now, driving it, I tell you what, I've been a little bit surprised, probably shouldn't have been surprised by quite how many people notice this thing. It's not very discreet. Now, the other livery options are either a black car with grey stickers on it, details, or a grey car with black on it, either of which a little bit more subtle. If you know, you know. But obviously this is the link back to that motorsport history, and that's always been in some ways the thing with the big powerful Audis, right? It's not necessarily about being a supercar, sports car, R8 style. It's about taking the existing family model and making it really, really cool, which this does in absolute droves. Anyway, I think we should go and make the most of the last bit of daylight and carry on with the journey. Let's get back on the road. My favourite signs on a country lane: drop the gear, second gear. It does squirrel around a little bit. You can tell it's really set up to drive very spiritedly, to be at home on a track, which makes absolutely no sense in a big estate or a wagon type car, right? But the RS6 has been known for so long as being at the top of this game. Yes, we've got the new M5 Touring now. There's been a lot discussed about that and how the weight of these things has increased. Obviously, hybrid bringing more power, more immediate torque. That's a whole different conversation, not one for today. But this is a car that on a road like this is both a whole lot of fun, although I would quite like to find a setting to turn off the steering assistance, because it's doing a magnificent job of tugging me around in directions that I don't necessarily want to go. But road opening up and just off you go. Have some fun with it. So, picture the scene. Get to the other end on the drive down towards the French Alps. What would this be like on those mountain passes up to Val d'Isère, up towards Sainte-Foy? And that is where, I'm not going to lie, it'd be a lot of fun. Would it be Purosangue levels of fun? Screaming V12 and the way that Ferraris are just set up to be sports cars, even if they're big kind of SUVs. It's not at that level. It's not even close to that level. The interior, right, and it starts as an A6, and that's, again, not something you can really compare. Don't get me wrong, tech is great, fit and finish is great, everything works very well, level of functionality is off the charts. I'm not the biggest fan of the haptic screens and the touch screens. I've talked about that a lot. A lot of people aren't a fan of the touch screens all over the Purosangue and other Ferrari steering wheels. But the leather and bespoke details of a Ferrari, it's a different thing. You can't compare these two cars in that way. Now, I did reference name a better car for it, and obviously by it I meant that trip, that run to the mountains, and this would do a really good job. I mean, they're known as the winter wagons. People like Jon Olsen with his crazy modified RS6 back in the day, people have had a lot of fun with them over the years doing big conversions, big packages, big things with them. I do need to get my head around all the settings because there are so many different things that you can change and switch between, and it's confusing to an extent, not going to lie. But I think where this probably excels even more is if we go and just cruise. So let me head to a bit of dual carriageway, a bit of motorway, and go try it out there. The roads are insanely busy right now, but a little bit of dual carriageway, it's effortlessly quick. It just gets a move on. Now, arguably, when you're on this kind of road, that is where you pop it back either into comfort or into auto, and I fiddle around and, yep, struggling to press the buttons. As always, that's not a huge surprise when it comes to these things. And popping it back into auto with the Audi Drive Select puts everything back into standard. I remember when I bought my first Audi, I ordered a brand new Audi S5 Cabriolet back in 2010, and Drive Select was an option, a customizable thing you could choose to order for that. It was the supercharged V6 motor in that car back at the time, and obviously that was the early days of being able to configure and set up a car in that level, at that level of car. And it's amazing how far all of this has evolved in terms of what you can do. Admittedly, in this particular example, obviously manually adjustable go back the other way, but in terms of adjustable suspension, adjustable steering, adjustable brake feel, adjustable just about everything, traction controls, drift modes, you name it. And obviously this has the latest suite of everything in terms of software, in terms of what you can configure and change. You've got different views on the dashboard if you want a little bit more information, or if you want the bigger rev counters, or if you want the full navigation screen, you can go to that and have that up full screen as well. You just go here, yeah, work it all out as I go. I remember how big a deal that was when it was launched and first introduced. I prefer to have the dials, and to be honest, to just keep it simple with the regular onboard computer. We are about to have a little bit more of an acceleration, so I'm going to switch through this stuff again. I think you can set up RS2 to just do what you want from it. There's a magnificent heads-up display. Sorry, you can't really see all of that in the same way that I can, but again, carryover from the family portfolio. And I think this is the thing with this, right? It is a special edition. It's not going to make sense for everyone. That's not the purpose of it, because it's a limited edition, very expensive Halo product. It says, hey, yeah, this is what we can do at a factory level with an RS6. What's interesting to me is that only 60 of them were for the UK out of the 660, which is probably about what you'd expect, around 8, 9, 10% normally with limited edition cars, but only 85 for the United States of America, and only 85 in a country that normally absorbs a good 30% of any limited production run is a very, very small figure. You'd have thought it would have been nearer towards 200 cars. Obviously massively popular in Germany. I presume car number 660 is the one that's retained by the factory in Ingolstadt, Germany, near to Munich. But this being the one under is pretty cool that that's what Audi UK have managed to retain for themselves. I think I should probably have it just in regular comfort settings, right? Because if we're doing the commute right now, if we're driving amongst the traffic as we are, that would be the best setup. Obviously, normally it would stop start and everything like that. But I've got it in some slightly fun settings to play with. Let's pop the shifter to the left and keep it manual. So when it goes red on the dashboard in front of me as well. Actually gives you a little bit of a kick to it. Not the harshest in the world, it's not silly, but there is a slightly bigger bump out of it that you feel versus if you just have it in regular automatic. Seats are nice, seats are comfortable, visibility is great. I love looking at the very wide arches of the RS6. In fact, I like that in the rear view mirror you can actually see a little bit of the spoiler as well sticking down over the upper part of the glass. I don't really know what else there is to say. You know, it's an RS6. It ticks a lot of boxes. It would be a great car to use for a winter tour, for a big trip somewhere. Would it be better than a Purosangue? Probably more efficient, cheaper to run, easier to service if anything happens to it, less depreciation from the mileage because these things are better built for it. And actually something really interesting that we haven't touched on yet is the market price. Just under £180,000 new, but there's only one advertised for sale right now, and it's advertised at, get this, just a smidge under £240,000, over £60,000 above the original list price with delivery mileage. And that's quite crazy. And who would ever have thought that that could be the case with a limited RS6? That didn't really make a whole lot of sense before, but that's the power of limited edition, that's the power of collectability. Now in front of us is my favourite tunnel. You do hear a little bit of the car, but you don't hear loads of it. So I'm going to pop the window down just a touch, just to get some of this as we can start dropping down the gears. But I don't think it's going to get crazy. See if we can get some bangs from it. Don't know if you can even hear it. You can hear it if I go into the red line. It's got a very signature sound, if you know RS6s. But over the wind noise and truck noise and tunnel noise, I'm not sure if you can even hear very much of it. That's the thing, hey, it's a factory car, it's still got to be compliant. Alas, I think that's the end of the fun for right now. Windows shut. Pop it back into comfort modes. Actually, there is a complete comfort mode. Maybe I should do that. Oh, that shuts it up entirely. You can't even hear a whisker from it now. Set the adaptive cruise control because we have obviously the sensors up front. And let it do its thing. Got some steering lane assist. We've got obviously the traffic sign readouts. We've got all of the different sensors and systems to make a very comfortable long distance cruiser. Cruising on the auto routes in France, the autobahns in Germany, and cruising off into the sunset. That is, of course, the soft limiter at about 4,000 RPM. New cars, alas, no crackles, pops, bangs, etc. But I do want to show you this because this is where you configure your Audi Drive Select. So to zoom in a little bit more on this, you have obviously the predefined settings, or when you go into RS2, it can choose your drive system, your steering, your engine sound, Quattro with sport differential, or your ESC. So you can have that set up exactly how you'd like it. I just pop this into dynamic. Obviously we've got our stop-start. RS1 the same. So these are super quick access, easy configurable driving modes. Once you've got your head around this, it does work quite well. I just find this down here, for example, if you want to press these buttons quickly, it's a bit of a faff to try and find them. Oh yeah, we've got an ESC button right there. Obviously when ESC is in sport, turns everything immediately back on. I'd love a little bit more sound from it. Built-in Alexa, built-in other functionality as well. Not going to go through all of this. We have seen it all before, but I do love that 659 out of 660. The Audi RS6. So let me switch this off. Let's step out and give you some final thoughts on driving this. Things I love about this car. One, that it exists. That the Audi engineers said, yeah, we'll try and make it. And the Audi board said, yes, we'll allow you to make it. Because it's completely unnecessary. It's just cool and a wonderful send-off for this very iconic model of car. Things I'm not the biggest fan of, the ride is incredibly firm, too much so for here in the United Kingdom. I'm sure we could soften it, but I also would imagine that Audi UK have softened the spec of the suspension on this anyway. The other side, the steering, it's quite bumpy and moves around a lot. I find myself often being tugged in directions I wasn't quite expecting it to go. Anyway, I love that we have it here. I'm normally not the biggest fan of cars with liveries. If you look around the garage, they're all either in a single color or perhaps have a factory accent. I don't tend to do liveries and crazy designs, yet I actually feel like this would do a very nice job of blending in. I love that it's a limited edition. I love that it exists. I love that you can find them on ECR as well, if you'd like to take a look through, so don't forget that. A big thank you to Audi for letting me take this out for a run. If you've enjoyed this and like to see more videos like this, check out the one right over here. But that's it for this time, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers!